link to our YouTube channel who requested it, but I'll make sure that you all have it. It's also on Canvas as well. So guys, we're going to be hopefully coming close to finishing chapter 1. If we don't finish chapter 1 today, we're going to finish it on Friday. And are we going to be here together on Friday? We're not. We're going to be online again. And after this Friday, because that'll be our third kind of online Friday, I'm going to check in with you guys and see if you like it. If everybody digs it, we're going to stick with it. If not, we're going to come back in class. So we'll see how the majority of people feel. Just a reminder, your second assignment in this class was due at midnight on Wednesday, or I should say it is due at midnight on Wednesday tonight, so it's not overdue. That's a typo on my part, because I got a little overzealous. It's due tonight at midnight. I'm actually going to start reviewing your LinkedIn assignments today, hopefully this afternoon with a little bit of luck. I'll have all those back to you by tomorrow. If you get something back that's not correct, fix it, and let me know that you fixed it, and I'll give you a perfect score. Now, guys, we're going to be having some visitors from Enactus who were originally supposed to come on Monday when we got saddled with a compressed schedule that we're going to reschedule for sometime later in the semester. So they will be visiting us, but not immediately. I normally get right in with some current events, and today I'm going to be jumping right into our content to make up a little bit of time. Inflation, because, you know, we got balloons that inflate and scary movies like It. Stay away from the red balloon. Everybody is afraid of red balloons and clowns. Nobody likes clowns, and people have a hard time with inflation as well. Who here can tell me, in a business standpoint, what is inflation? Anybody know? What is inflation? We know if we inflate a balloon, it expands, it rises. What is inflation? Anybody know? Let's take it. Yes? Yeah, you're right. So inflation does affect all those things. You're so close. You're turning up. You're so close. So inflation affects our economy. It does. Absolutely. But anybody know what is inflation? Yes.
When the value of the dollar goes down.
Inflation definitely happens at that point too. But fundamentally, what is inflation? You guys are, you're so close. When something inflates, what direction does it usually go if it's a balloon? It goes up. So inflation is the rise of prices over time. When you hear people talk about inflation, does it have a positive or negative connotation? Everybody says it's negative. Inflation. Oh, this is bad. The price of gas is going up. The price of raw materials are going up. This is bad. In reality, inflation is a natural process because other things inflate too. Say, for example, the minimum wage goes up. That's a whole other argument whether or not the minimum wage should go up. If it goes up, it costs more to do business. It costs more to be able to purchase things. It costs more to be able to get things done. That also can create inflation. So inflation is not necessarily positive or negative. It just is, and it's a natural process. For example, if you go back to the early 1970s, does anybody have any idea what a gallon of gas cost in 1970? About 50 cents. And right now, the average price in the United States is hovering right around $2.75, $2.80. And you might say to yourself, wow, how can people deal with that? Well, wages also went up too. How many of you, by the way, would love it if somebody gifted you a brand new Ford Mustang? Does anybody like the Mustang? I love that car. Do you know what a Mustang cost when it came out in 1964? $2,400. You could buy a new base Mustang for $2,400. Anybody have an idea what a new Mustang base model is going to cost you today? Yeah, if you get any kind of options at all, right? So that, again, is inflation at work. It doesn't mean it's good or bad. We get into scenarios where it can be good or bad if salaries don't keep pace with inflation. So, for example, if I'm making $10 an hour and milk is $3 a gallon, and if I go to $20 an hour and milk goes to $6 a gallon, I've kept pace with inflation. The problem comes when our wages don't keep pace with inflation. So here, inflation is just the rise of price over time, but we have some other parts that go off of this, some other terms that are associated with it. If the inflation rate is slowing down, we have what we refer to as disinflation. And that sounds good on the surface, saying, ooh, that's good, inflation is not going so fast. That can also mean our economy is slowing down. Then we have deflation. That means overall prices are going down. And a supply and demand economy, that can mean we've got unused inventory that we need to get rid of, and nobody's buying. Then we have some weird phenomenon called stagflation, where the economy is slowing down, but prices are still going up. You may say to yourself, how the heck does that happen? Actually, does anybody have an idea how that might happen? We know if we're in a free market economy, we go on supply and demand. Why might stagflation happen? It's a complex phenomenon. Let me give you a scenario. Let's go back to 2008. You guys were very, oh my goodness, how old would you guys have been in 2008? I'm doing this so I can make myself really depressed, so I'll drink an extra beer from you. So how old would you have been in 2008? 8 years old. My goodness, I am so old, but I'm still standing. So you're still drawing breath. There's still hope. Remember. But what it comes down to is basically in 2008, the economy tanked because of the housing market. All our money was tied up in housing, and all of a sudden people couldn't pay their bills. Well, all of a sudden, if you're losing your house, is your vehicle payment going to be a high priority to you? Probably not. So people weren't paying their car payments. All of a sudden, car companies weren't selling either, and 2 of the big 3 went bankrupt. What happens at that point? You're not making as many cars, and so the cars that are on the lot, when the economy starts, bottoming out, and you still need a car, there may still be an increase in prices because there's fewer cars to go around. We've actually sort of seen that happen this year. In this past year, we had COVID-19 happening. All the major car companies started shutting down. And as a result, there was less inventory, and when you go in to buy a car, you couldn't wheel and deal because the dealer had the advantage. In fact, even used car prices went up. So that's an example of stagflation in action. Does that make sense, guys? Okay, so if you have limited supply and still some kind of demand and no idea when you're getting more supply, stagflation can still drive prices up. There we go. All right, well, when we start thinking about inflation, why prices rise? Remember that. Inflation simply means prices rise. We have what we refer to as cost push inflation. And here's what that means. It means if the price of raw material or labor goes up, if all of a sudden, for example, we're making products, I'll give you an example. How many of you, just do this with me here. Hold up your iPhone if you have an iPhone. Yes. Actually, do this and wave your hand in the air like you just don't care. Yeah, absolutely right. Guys, you guys may not realize this, but a part of your iPhone probably came from Africa. Cell phones are made with something called rare earth elements. And rare earth elements only come from a few places on the planet. There are supplies in Africa, there are supplies in China, there's some off the coast of Japan. It's a very limited element. And more people want smartphones all the time. So when the price of those rare earth elements goes up, Apple charges you more for a phone because it costs them more to make it. Another example might be if I'm in Seattle. Seattle, by the way, about 2 years ago, raised their minimum wage to $15 an hour. So all of a sudden, it's more expensive to cook stuff because your cooks are making more money. It's more expensive to do anything. That's cost push inflation. Then we get into demand pull, which also can cross over a little with cost push. Demand pull means I've got an unlimited source of demand and limited product. There's a reason, guys. Let's talk for a second about Christmas time. How many of you, if you will bear with me here, can remember being a kid when there was that one thing you wanted so bad for Christmas it was impossible to get? Did you guys ever have that experience? Well, here's what happens, guys. Demand pull means we've got this little package of available cartridges for a video game system. Or we've got a short supply of a certain transformer. Or, for my generation, for whatever reason, kids love Cabbage Patch Dolls. And so they had a limited supply and unlimited demand, which means people would pay high prices for them. You could get it because it was a buyer's market if you had a product that somebody wanted. By the way, guys, it's no secret that in traditional retail, the highest, most demand items of the Christmas season usually become available en masse about when. So if there's something you wanted for Christmas, you couldn't get in December. Once it usually come into the stores. This is not coincidental, by the way. The high demand stuff usually shows up in January. Why is that? We put a few out in December, but a lot shows up in January. Why would retailers do that? Any idea? In the United States, When do people spend most of their money? Christmas time. You're spending thousands of dollars on Christmas presents. And all of a sudden, typically, between the months of about January and March, traditional retailers have this dead period where nobody's buying anything because they're all broke. And that's why you take the high-demand Christmas items that the kids wanted and you stick them into stores around January, February, March. It gets people back into the stores. Now, that's a traditional retail model. E-commerce is changing that. But the bottom line, cost push means your prices have gone up and you're passing them on to the consumer. Demand pull means you've got a limited amount of things to sell and there's high demand for what you are selling, and that means prices go up. Supply and demand. And this also goes hand in hand because I think somebody this morning was also saying about the effect that inflation can have on the economy. Well, unemployment can be one of those effects. Guys, unemployment is a very fundamental part of our economic equation, but it can be a little difficult to understand. I'm going to cover this slide on unemployment, and then we're going to take our first break of the day to give you a chance for a question. All right, we have a form of unemployment called frictional unemployment. If we have friction between people, if you say people are experiencing friction, what does that mean? We're rubbing each other the wrong way, right? So if there's friction between people and somebody says, hey, I have friction with my boss, so I'm going to leave my company. Is that good? Is that a good or a bad sign for the economy if we have high levels of frictional unemployment? Is that a good or a bad sign that people leave a job when they don't like their coworkers or the boss? So we're going to do it by show of hands. How many think that's bad? How many think that could be good? How many don't know? It's okay not to know. That's how we learn. Somebody said good. Can you tell me what? Yes.
It's not good for the company, but market-wise, that person sees that they have the opportunity to get another job, a better job somewhere else.
Exactly right. If people feel confident enough to say, I don't like this job, I am out the door because I can get another job, that shows we probably have a strong economy. And by the way, prior to COVID, our unemployment rate in the United States was less than 4%. That meant that basically anybody who wanted a job could get one. And it meant that people who were under the age of 30 weren't sticking around at jobs longer than about 3 years because you wanted to get other opportunities. That's the result of a good economy. Then we get to structural, what we call structural unemployment. And what that means is something has happened that you're getting fired. The market went down, for example, and we can't afford to pay everybody, so we've got to get rid of somebody. That is structural. Then we get into cyclical unemployment. What that means is, for example, if we have people who got hired on to industries that kind of have rises and falls. For example, right now, we're going to be seeing a lot of people who probably lose their jobs in the fracking industry because of some of the new environmental regulations that are coming in. That kind of ebbs and flows too. That is cyclical. Those jobs will come back at some point. Then we get into seasonal unemployment. We hire all these additional workers for the holiday season, and come January, we don't need them anymore, so we get rid of them because it's seasonal unemployment. And again, we had a really low unemployment rate right before COVID. I hope we can get back there. But actually, we're going to take a break after this slide. Does anybody know what the unemployment rate really means? So we're talking, let's say we were back in February of 2020, and we said our unemployment rate was sitting at 4%. What does that really mean? Anybody know? What do you think, guys? If their unemployment rate is 4%, what does it mean? Take a shot. Yeah, go for it, Will.
That 4% of the people who could work aren't.
You're so close. It's 4% of the people who are actively seeking employment who can't get jobs. So that's still a good thing. What it does not tell us, though, is something called our labor force participation rate. Write this down, because this is something that's a little different between the two. Your unemployment rate, I didn't put that on the slide so specifically I could actually write this down, because I sometimes like putting this on a test. Unemployment rate is the percentage of people who are actively trying to get a job who cannot get a job. The labor force participation rate is the percentage of everybody in a country who is eligible to work who is actually working. Does anybody have a guess? In the United States, right now we know our labor unemployment rate is right around 6%. It's not great, but it's not horrible. Anybody have a guess as to what our labor force participation rate is? Of everybody who's eligible to work, who could work, where are we at? In fact, I'll even let you look it up. If somebody will look up U.S. labor force participation rate, tell me what comes up on Google. Google, our gateway to the world. What would we do without you, Google? How much is it? 67%. So we got right around 7 out of every 10 people who are eligible to work are working. Thank you for that. So guys, here's the deal. That means we have this other 30% who could work who are not. Right now, with unemployment being around 6%, we're not that concerned about them. We have enough people to fill our jobs. When we went back to about March or February, before the pandemic of 2020, more companies were starting to say, how can we recruit people who are not normally in the workforce? And that was leading to reform and getting more recovering criminals back into the workplace, people who had been in jail with criminal records, getting more recovering drug addicts, getting more at-risk populations back in the workforce because they make up a large percentage of that 30%. So when the unemployment rate gets low, sometimes we get opportunities open up parts of the market to people who typically are not welcome there. So that can be a really good thing. I'm passionate about that. I did a lot of work the last couple of years working with what we refer to as high-risk job seekers. If you ever get a chance to work with somebody who has had some down times in their life, who's down on the luck, and wants to get back into the workforce, it'll change your life. I promise you that. But we're going to pause for our first question of the day. So, who among you has a question or comment on this amazing day today? It is an amazing day. You know what? We got up today. Not everybody did, so it's a good day. So who here has a question for me? Otherwise, I may randomly walk around the room and call on someone and see what they want to say or want to ask. You can always say something, too. What would you like to say or ask? Who's it going to be? Yes! Oh, boy, I think Tampa. I think Tampa Bay's going to win. Who here's with me? I just think Tom Brady's unstoppable. Agree or disagree?
Well, he's unstoppable, but Mahomes is also.
It's just one of these things like, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and my whole family and everybody in our Steeler fans. I love the Steelers too. But when I hear people busting on Brady, it's like you're just angry because he's that good. And he is. And the guy's in his 40s, and he's still really good. So I don't know. To me, the psychological advantage is with them. What do you guys think? Who do you guys think is going to win the big game? Oh, come on. You guys have to have an opinion. Yes.
I don't know. I think it's going to be like a real close game.
Really?
Yeah, it's going to be good. I can't call it.
Any estimates on scores?
Probably like 25 to 26.
You think it's going to come down that close, huh?
Yeah, wow. They both have nice receiver numbers.
It's not going to be a boring game. I guarantee you that. You know what's funny? This year, though, in the business model of it, a lot of the big advertisers have pulled out because they basically didn't want to spend their money on the game. Budweiser's not advertising anything but their light beers and their seltzers this year. So the ads might be a little more subdued this year, but the game itself might be exciting. And I think they were limiting attendance, I think, to 1/4 of capacity for this game too. So it's going to be different for the players too, I would think, not having noise. How many of you, by the way, because I know we've got some competitive athletes in here, how many of you have had to compete regularly to empty arenas or areas right now? How many of you? What's the experience like?
I mean, well, for my sport, you don't really need people to be there.
Huh?
But I feel like for other sports like football and basketball, if you have a crowd cheering you on, you're going to play that.
Yeah, the momentum can shift. And I have to say, I'm not a competitive athlete, but I'm a performer, and I've played some gigs where we're playing to the internet, and you're streaming, and it's so hard to get into it when there's people nowhere. You're playing to a camera. It's the weirdest thing in the world. So we're going to be seeing the first ever socially distanced Super Bowl. History's being made. Hopefully by next year, that'll be in the past. Guys, we talked about some of the business cycles. We talked about economic booms, bust, return to form, and double-dip recessions. We talked about full employment. Well, actually, full employment, guys, basically anytime you get down to about 3 or 4%, this won't be on an exam, but you'll hear it talked about on places like CNBC. If you get to 3 or 4%, we consider that full employment because almost everybody who has a job has one. And we talked about the differences between demand pull, which is based on the cost of goods and services going up, and cost push, inflation being the demand for items. The next thing we're going to be getting into is monetary policy versus fiscal policy. And we're going to be basically talking about how a country manages their finances. We're also going to be talking about debt. Oh my goodness, the debt. It's something that you need to be aware of. In fact, we're going to watch our debt on the United States unfold in real time and part of this, guys. So we've got fiscal and monetary policy. We start talking about fiscal. Fiscal starts with an F, which also is the first word in finance. It's also the first letter in some really interesting words, but we're going to stick with fiscal. Fiscal basically means you're deciding whether or not you're raising or lowering taxes. Nobody ever gets excited to say, wow, when taxes are going up, I can't wait to pay for more services. But we do benefit from services. Generally speaking, and when I say this is not a judgment on anybody's political beliefs. It's truly not. But generally speaking, Republicans tend to favor lower taxation, and Democrats tend to favor higher taxation. The problem with both of those parties is nobody is keeping pace with the amount of money we're borrowing. So we are in debt as a nation because regardless of who is in office, we spend more than we pull in. So fiscal policy is making the decision whether or not you're going to raise or lower taxes. And then we get into monetary policy. Guys, monetary policy simply means we're deciding how much cash we put in circulation and how much we're going to charge on interest. When we hear about the feds set the interest rate, how many have heard that expression? I'm not going to call you, but have you heard that expression? The feds are setting the interest rate. No, you've never heard that. Well, the feds have been setting the interest rate pretty close to zero to make lending attractive for the past couple of years because we're trying to get out of a recession, particularly now that we are in the throes of COVID. They're trying to make it easy to borrow money so that people will borrow money to buy houses, cars, and to even make payroll. So that's a form of monetary policy. Guys, a lot of people recently got their second stimulus check in the mail. Why did the government send people stimulus checks in the United States? We've done it twice in the last 12 months. Why did we do it? Why did the government send me some money? Yes?
Because a lot of people don't have extra money to spend, so they send out that money in hopes that you spend it to keep the economy moving.
Exactly right. So we have people who are basically haven't worked regular since last March, who are having a hard time paying the bills. So part of it is simply to try to provide some relief to people. And the other part of it is to try to get people spending money. Here's the problem with that. Actually, let me ask you guys, what was the problem with everybody getting a stimulus check? We obviously know some people really needed it. What happened for the folks who didn't need the stimulus check? What did a lot of people do with it? That's exactly what I did. I got $600 that I'll never say I don't need $600. I'm going to say that the government probably didn't need to give me $600. I'm still working. I have a good job and I love what I do. That went right in my savings account. So a lot of people aren't recirculating that money, and that's sometimes the problem with that kind of monetary policy. Now, sometimes, for example, we have what we refer to as contractionary, and that means we're actually trying to pull money out of circulation. Why do we do that? Well, we want people to put money into savings, and one of the things that we encourage people to do is to buy bonds. And then we have, and bonds, we'll talk more when we get into securities. When you buy a savings bond, this is always a good question. How many of you have ever had one of your grandparents buy you a U.S. savings bond? Oh, that's like the ultimate grandparent gift. It's like the only thing that could be a better grandparent gift than that might be socks or something like that. That's a great grandparent gift. What you're actually doing when you buy a U.S. savings bond is you're lending the government money. And when it matures, you get more money out than you put in. So we're giving people a temporary loan. And so we do this stuff to avoid inflation. When you have expansionary policy, it means, which is where we are right now, by the way, we're trying to get more money in circulation and we're lowering the interest rates so people will borrow and put money into the markets. They want more people to invest in the stock market. Guys, right now, generally speaking, Actually, I don't know if you guys have ever heard these terms before. We'll see if you've heard the terms. How many of you have heard the terms bull and bear market? Okay, a couple of you have heard. Guys, what does a bull do when it sees red? It charges. And so people who believe that we are in a bull market believe the markets are going up, and they're pretty close to correct. We've had some disruptions. We've had pretty much a bull market since right around 2009, 2010. The market's been going up. People who believe in bear markets believe that markets are going to contract. And so expansionary economic policy, if we lower the interest rate, what that does, it encourages people to borrow money so they put it back into the economy. It also discourages people from saving, because why would I put money into the bank when I'm making next to no interest when I could put it into the markets and gamble on GameStop and make a 700% turnaround? So those are examples of government tools. This stuff can be a little abstract, particularly before we get into our chapter on markets. So if you're not totally understanding this stuff, do not fret, do not worry. How many of you, by the way, have something invested in the stock? I love that we have people playing the markets. Will you guys share with me, like, what's your favorite stock right now that you own?
I'm on this AMC train, so
I haven't watched that the last couple of days. What's happening there?
they were trying to short squeeze it yesterday. So everyone, all the hedge funds were dumping a bunch of money back and forth with each other. So
It's kind of like the secret's out now. I think they're going to try to block more of this from happening. But that's interesting. AMC, what's your favorite stock right now?
Tesla.
Oh, how many shares do you own?
10.
Oh man, good for you. What's your favorite stock?
Neo.
I'm not familiar with that one.
It's like an electric car company. They like compete with Tesla. They make like electric supercars. I bought it at $17 a share, and it's at like 60 now.
Isn't that a wonderful feeling?
Yeah.
I had the same feeling when I bought Planet Fitness at 29 at their IPO, and I think it topped out at 70 so far this year. I think once the recession's over, Planet Fitness is going to really pick up too. But my point is, a lot of us play in the markets these days. It'll make more sense when we get into it, guys. Here's what we get into when people start sweating about the debt. How many of you, by show of hands, hate owing people money? I hate it. I hate having debt hanging over my head. I live simply because I hate debt. When we get to our national deficit, that means how much are we overspending versus the money we're pulling in? And how do we primarily get money into the country? What's our primary source of revenue for the government? It's taxes. I don't mean time out, I don't mean YMCA, it's taxes. We add this stuff over time. Year after year, when we have this deficit, we get a national debt because we're lugging this around. And guess what we're paying on it, guys? We're paying interest on it. We have these rare occasions when the country actually has a surplus. The last time we had a surplus was the year 2000. We came out of the 90s with a balanced budget and a surplus. And President George W. Bush took the surplus and sent it to taxpayers in the form of stimulus checks because we were entering a recession, and he was hoping to stave off a recession by getting people spending. It was a big gamble in 2000. Here's one of the things that derailed it. What happened the very next year? 9/11. And since 9/11, we've been involved in several wars. And again, I don't mean this as a political statement. I'm talking finances. We've been in several wars, and we've been still trying to avoid raising taxes to pay for them. So that's added to our national debt and national deficit. I'm going to show you something, guys. This is in real time. If you want to see the debt racking up in real time, it's called the debt clock. You can look it up on Google. But it works in real time, so we get to see in real time just how much debt we are in. Here we go. As of today, the 3rd of February, 9:38 a.m., the year is 2021. Our national debt is 27,478,786,242. I couldn't keep up with it. I couldn't see it that quickly. So we are in more national debt right now. Our debt is bigger than our gross domestic product. Is that a problem? It could be. The reason it could be is sooner or later the people who you're borrowing money from may want paid back. And our number one debt holder is China. So we borrow money from them all the time through the World Bank. And so right now, if we look here at the national debt per citizen, stacks up. If we all wanted to get our country out of debt, it's easy. Every one of us just has to pay $84,160 and we'll be out of debt. Everybody up for that? Yeah, I don't see a lot of people writing checks. And here's the thing, that's per citizen. If we go to people who actually pay taxes, people who are of age, people who are not on Social Security, all of us who are of working age, then we're going to have to pay $222,191 a piece to get us out of debt. That's the problem with overspending. Now, there are people who don't believe deficits are a problem. There are some economists who say, so what? We're the most powerful country in the world. Nobody's ever going to come to claim this stuff. We're going to be just fine. Some people feel differently. That's something you have to decide for yourself and gets beyond what we're going to cover in terms of economics and a basic 100 level business class. I put it up there because I want you to see it. Any thoughts, guys? In the last year of our lives, the debt has accrued at a faster rate than I think any other point in history. What drove that? The pandemic, because everything's shutting down, but we got to keep things propped up. So it's a bad situation to be in. So how do we finance debt? If you're the United States government, yes, you can lend your country money by buying bonds, and other countries can also buy bonds, like Japan. Actually, I misspoke. Japan, as of April last year, was our largest debt holder. They overshot China. So China's number 2. UK is number 3. So we owe money to other people who eventually will need to be repaid. With me so far, guys? Okay. Well, guys, we're going to get into a final section on price and demand. We're going to be talking about what we refer to as finding equilibrium and what really drives the market. Actually, you know what though? Because we had kind of a slow day on Monday, and today I feel like we're having a good day. I feel like we're going to cover 2 more slides, and after that second slide, somebody here is going to make a statement or ask a question. We're going to get out just a couple minutes early today. So in terms of a demand point, we're talking about supply and demand. We have to think what we want to sell a product at. For example, there's a difference if you buy a pair of Nike sneakers versus a pair of, a brand that used to be big that isn't big anymore. Let's say, what's a brand that's fallen out of favor? Reebok. Reebok used to be a good brand, but they're not as highly regarded as they used to be. So Nike may want to sell their sneakers at $100, and they know that if they sell at $100, they can sell 600 pairs of that shoe. That's what the market will bear. We know if we raise the price, that we'll sell fewer pairs of shoes, but we may have another function behind that. If we're selling Jordans, we may raise the price because we want it to be a status symbol good. Or if we're Reebok, we may lower the price and say we'll make a lower profit margin, but we're going to sell more pairs of sneakers. So all of these things play into supply and demand. By the way, guys, for any of you, I'm a Nike fan. I love Nike products. Generally speaking, what's the price for a new standard pair of Nikes? I'm not talking Jordans. Just a new pair of training shoes, running shoes. If they're new and hot, what are they going to cost you? Yes, let's say between $100 and $130. How much material and labor actually goes into making those shoes? About. And so most of Nike's products, for example, are made in Indonesia, Vietnam, China, low labor rates. So we're talking about things that have a very high profit margin. Although money is going other places too. We're paying designers, we're paying marketing people, we're paying all those folks. Reebok doesn't have to pay all that stuff because they're competing on a different level, which isn't status, it's price. So all of these things go together. So we know, for example, our textbook uses a jacket for snowboarders, and they basically say that if we want to sell 800 jackets at $100, or sorry, if we want to sell the jacket at $100, we'll move about 800 of these things. The more we drive up the price, the less the market will generally bear, but we have to find what our pain point is. So, for example, if we move up the price too far, we're going to fall beneath the number we want to sell. If we push the price back too far, we're going to sell more, but we might not actually be making money depending on the price of supply and demand. So our sweet spot of our profit margin that we want and how many profits we want to sell, our equilibrium point is right here. We want to sell them at $80, and we're okay with selling at $700. We moved it up in the previous slide to $100 and we were still able to sell 800 jackets, status applies for that as well. Equilibrium point, write this down, is basically what the market will bear based on the profit margin you want to make. Yes, sir?
Is that per month or per year?
It could be, you can measure it either way. So it would depend on what kind of volume you're doing. Generally speaking, whether you're going by the year, because there will also be a curve through the year. The one I'm presenting is an oversimplification. Generally speaking, if you know the profit margin you want to make per item and the number that you want to sell, that's going to determine where your equilibrium is. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, you have a comment too?
I can't hear you.
Oh, geez.
You hear me?
I can hear you now. You can hear me earlier, right?
Oh.
Yeah, I think you're muted now.
It just recently happened. It's all good now.
Okay, I'm sorry about that, man. So, and I'm recording this as well. Actually, you know what, guys? That's a good slide for us to end on. If somebody has a question, we can end early. Question or comment? Yes, sir.
If you got one superpower, what would it be?
I'd want to be able to fly. What about you?
The power of inconvenience.
Power of, say this again?
Inconvenience.
Inconvenience. Tell me more about that one.
Like you're walking to me, I just start blocking your shoes.
Yeah, there's an answer to that question.